skills overlap. My name is Cynthia Peters. I'm the editor of The Change Agent, and I also do a lot of professional development around the country on all sorts of different topics. And I want to quickly hand it over to Andy, who's going to do a little bit more of an introduction, and then to Mike, who's going to give us some information about using this platform. Andy?
Okay, thanks. Hi, everybody. This is Andy Nash. I'm the director of the New England Literacy Resource Center, and I'm just coming on because we usually do our webinars just for New England, and we've started to open them because why not? It doesn't no skin off our nose to open it to people. And so I just want to let those who may not know us to know that we're a cross-state collaboration that helps adult educators in New England states network, and we also provide PD activities on topics that are prioritized by our board. And the source of this webinar that we're doing today on this topic is that one of the things the board said was that the field is confused about is that we have so many different mandates coming in that we have to pay attention to, and people were, perplexed about that and curious about how do you integrate them instead of dealing with them one at a time. So we're thinking about webinars where we're pulling things together, like you have to pay attention to digital literacy and you also have to pay attention to work readiness. How do those things fit together? And so this webinar is about paying attention to two parts of the CCR standards that you can find overlaps in to make teaching more integrated and to make your teaching life a little bit easier. So hello and welcome.
Thank you, Andy. And now, Mike, what do you have for us regarding the platform?
Yeah, thank you, guys. That was a great introduction. So just real quickly, we would just want to give you all a heads up on some of you might be new to using the WebEx platform. And so as some of you who were here early got to troubleshoot with us, this will be a little more on the interactive side as far as webinars go. And so we definitely want you all to feel comfortable using the text option, using the chat option on the bottom right corner. So as you can see in the slide where the hands are. So that way you can address all participants. And so that way whenever there's an interactive portion of it, or if you have a question, you can just make sure it gets heard and the presenter can get to it when it's appropriate. You can, of course, call in or use your computer, microphone, speaker setup, whatever is most comfortable for you. This session will be recorded, and so if you would like access to it later, we'll make those links available to everybody after the presentation. And if you have any questions or anything goes wrong, you can't hear anything, or if it starts lagging, anything like that, please feel free to ping me privately at the Mike Prentice host option. And you can chat at me, and I will do my best to help you resolve any issues that come up. So hope you enjoyed the presentation, and again, I'm available this entire time if anything happens.
Thanks a lot, Mike. And also, Mike, thanks for reposting. Some people have been introducing themselves privately to you, and I see that you've reposted them. So just a reminder to everybody, when you post, it would be great if everybody could see everything that everybody's writing, unless it's like a tech issue and you really just want Mike to privately help you out with that. Otherwise, just communicate to all participants, and then we'll all be able to be, hearing what each other is saying. So again, welcome. I'm so glad you all are here. I wanted to say that the way that my work on the interdisciplinary nature of the math and the ELA standards came about was the Change Agent did a special issue on math. And we had this amazing editorial board that included Cynthia Bell, who's here with us today. And so Cynthia, I want to just give a shout out to you. If you ever want to chime in about anything, we can open up your mic and maybe you could add something. But really had an amazing board and lots of people who do PD, professional development in math, and really helped me learn a lot about math and helped me develop really creative activities that were much richer than they would have been if I had left to do them on my own. So I also want to give a special shout out to Sarah Lonberg-Liu and Connie Rivera. Sarah and I did a workshop with similar themes at the National College Transition Network Conference in Cambridge just this last fall. And so she helped me develop some of these ideas. And Connie's work also features a lot in the workshop. So Thank you to the editorial board. And let's get started by diving into an activity. So this is why I've been kind of obsessed about the chat box working properly, because I'm going to ask people to go straight to the chat box and try out this activity. And basically, this activity shows up really early on in the Change Agent magazine, and it's something that you can do in the classroom really easily, and it's a great example of merging together math and ELA skills. So the activity is basically to notice that these three people have these different amounts of siblings. And the activity is to write two statements comparing the number of siblings that they have. And the way I want you to do this, I want you to actually do this right now in the chat box. Try this out, because this is always a good thing to do. When we're going to have our students do something, we can try it ourselves. But also in the process of all of us doing it, we'll sort of learn something about how this works. So write two statements comparing the number of siblings. And the way to do this is you can pick any two and compare them. So for example, you can pick Sylvia and Dana, or you can pick Sylvia and Mario, or Dana and Mario, or you can pick all three. Okay? And your choice. Just write two statements that are true about the relationship between the people and the number of siblings that they have. So I'm going to give a couple minutes for people to answer the question. I see some people already are doing it. Let's see. Anita wrote that Sylvia has half as many siblings as Dana. Good. Mario has 1/3 the number of siblings as Sylvia. Great. Great. Andy wrote Dana has the most siblings. Excellent. Yeah. Can I get a few more people to see? Linda says that Sylvia has 2 more siblings than Mario. Great. Great. Anita was sort of using a multiplier approach, and Sylvia is just using like an additive approach, like how many more, which number more or less. Good. And Linda, you could phrase that in the opposite way, right? Mario has 2 less siblings than Sylvia. That would be kind of an awkward phrasing, but I guess it would be, the same information in backwards. Andy says Dana has more than Sylvia's and Mario's combined. Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. Great. Do other people have any other ways of saying this? As you can imagine, there's many, many things that you could say here, right? Well, does anybody else want to add a statement? This is also good practice, just writing true statements, which is a good math activity. Writing a true statement about something that you see, about the data that's put in front of you. So if you were going to do this in the classroom, I see Linda write, Mario has the least number of siblings. Oh, I'm so glad the word least came up. That's great, because least is a great word. It has so many different ways you can use it in the English language, but definitely applicable here as the opposite of most, so a good ELA moment there. Let me show you the next slide, which has a couple of ideas about how to use this in the classroom. You could post the problem on large pieces of newsprint and then put those pieces of newsprint around the room. And at the top of each piece, you could have Sylvia and Dana, and then show, in stick figures the amount of siblings they have. Same with Sylvia and Mario, Mario and Dana, and then all three. And I recommend drawing the little stick figures because it's just nice to have a visual of it. It also teaches that, in math, when you create a visual, it can kind of help you solve a problem. It doesn't have to just stay in the word realm. You can use like something that you can manipulate with your hands, or something you can visualize with your eyes. So then you put up these 4 sheets of paper all around the classroom, and students divide into groups, and they go around and they add statements to the sheets, right? So each group puts a few statements, and then they move to the next sheet, and they maybe try to add a few more statements, and you kind of go around like that. And then afterwards, everyone does a little gallery walk where they look at all the statements. And it's a really interesting thing to do in the classroom because people get to see everyone's approach and everyone's minds at work, and possibly critique the reasoning. Maybe there might be some flawed reasoning in there that people might need to, that that might get uncovered in the process of people bringing their critical minds to just sort of reading everyone's statements. So it's also just so interesting to see people's creativity, the ways people come up to look at it and the angle that people come up with to look at it. Okay, looking to see if I don't see too many more contributions to the statements, but maybe that was enough for you to get an idea of how you might be able to use this in the classroom. So I wanted to just dive into a sort of an interdisciplinary activity right off the bat. I'm going to, have some slides about, what our goals are for this webinar and things like that, and a little bit more background on the interdisciplinary nature of math and ELA standards. But I thought it would be it would loosen us up and warm us up if we just started out with an activity. So that's why I just jumped right into that, and we'll be referring back to it as we go. But meanwhile, I wanted to also just provide a little bit of context for you about this activity. So it shows up on page 4 of the math issue of the Change Agent. And I wanted to put it really early on because it goes with this article which is called Help Me Mom, and it's by a student who talks about one of the things that motivates her to learn English is that she wants to be able to help her kids with their math homework. And it's a sweet story. She talks about how when she was a kid, her mother couldn't help her with her math homework because her mother was very low literacy. She didn't have much schooling, and her mother would be really upset and cry because she couldn't help her kids with their homework. And now this student actually has quite a lot of math skills, but she doesn't have the English language skills to be able to help her kids in English with their math. So she's wanting to change that up. So this article just provides a little bit of context and maybe even a piece that a lot of your students might be able to relate to if you use this in the classroom. So many of our students are motivated to improve their English language skills because of wanting to help their kids with their homework. And math vocabulary is a great way for students to improve their literacy skills and their math skills. Okay, so backing up a little bit to look at what we hope to accomplish in this workshop, I wanted to start with this broad idea, like what are the merits of interdisciplinary learning? Why does it matter? Why create a webinar on this topic? So we're going to approach that a little bit. And then we're going to learn some of the actual ELA and math. Well, in math they're called practices, but in ELA they're not called practices, they're called standards. We're going to look at some of those and see where they overlap pretty significantly. I have to say, the more I studied them, the more I saw just very significant overlap and why that matters to put our attention on that. And then also you're going to see modeled some and be able to experiment with some lesson activities that build both language and math skills. Okay, so why an interdisciplinary approach? I mean, Andy already mentioned one thing in her introduction, which is, teachers have so much to track, right? I mean, we're so many standards that we're supposed to be keeping track of. We're supposed to be, helping our students advance for work and college readiness. And rather than necessarily having to think of all these pieces in their individual silos that get individually addressed in little pockets, we could actually open up our thinking here and see them as overlapping and being addressed whether we're in math class or English class. We get the added benefit of our students get to practice, using, say a math practice that then is very relevant in their ELA class. And when teachers are clear about the overlap, it's something that you can be transparent about with your students. So you could say to your students, hey, we're doing this in math class, but this is a skill you need to bring over to your English class as well. And the same in English. We're doing it this way because this strategy matters not just here in this English class, but also in your math class. So it's going to improve your ability to solve problems in math. But if you stick with me and we're going to attend to precision in a certain way, you're going to see that it's going to help you in math as well, and vice versa. So that idea of de-siloing some of the practices, I think it's a real motivator for teachers and for students. It gives students this kind of sense of efficacy where, they have practice asking themselves, how do I solve this? and then solving it. But they ask themselves, what tools do I need to solve this? And then they use the tools to solve it. And that's a skill that you need in all academic and workplace parts of your life. Practice recognizing patterns is another thing that comes up a lot. Experiencing success using these strategies. So I have a picture of a Rubik's Cube up here because I want to tell you I was taking care of these young friends of mine last night, and the little boy, Jonah, is a third grader, and he is just all over this Rubik's Cube thing. Oh my God, he had like 4 of them, and he was just mixing them up and solving them over and over and over again. And I said to him, how do you do that? I mean, I've never been able to solve a Rubik's Cube. And he said, it's simple. There's an algorithm. And I couldn't believe an 8-year-old was using this word algorithm. And probably if I asked him to define algorithm, he probably wouldn't even really necessarily know the exact definition of it, but he was using it in the context, very accurately in the context. So apparently, for those who don't know, the way to solve a Rubik's Cube is, you have to learn certain algorithms. And he had a little piece of paper where his fellow third grader had written down the steps. And it's more complicated than I'm making it sound, and there's a lot, that you learn from practicing it over and over again. But it's totally solvable. There's nothing magical or mysterious. You don't have to be a genius to solve a Rubik's Cube. You just have to be patient enough to follow the steps and to learn the algorithm and to learn the sort of the underlying logic of the thing. And I just thought it was a fascinating moment of a very transferable skill. I mean, this little boy's kind of getting this lesson in his life that you can solve things. Like, it looks unsolvable, but you can solve things by understanding the underlying pattern. And I was really interested to notice his sister would come in and say, oh, I'm really bad at Rubik's Cube, and kind of walk by and not engage. And I wanted to reframe for her, it's not about being bad at it, but maybe you don't have the patience for this complicated algorithm or something, or maybe you don't have the patience for manipulating an object with no seeming, what's the purpose of it? Or, I wanted to try to give her a different framing for what she was doing, because that's something that we like to loosen up for our students, right? This idea that they're bad at something. That's kind of rigid, frozen thinking. And when we can give students a way to loosen that up and kind of thaw that little frozen approach to how they think about themselves, then it really opens them up across disciplines to be confronted with a hard thing and take it on and be able to solve it. So another reason why to do interdisciplinary work. I mentioned that with the Rubik's Cube, it's not magic, and actually we have an article in the Change Agent by Connie Rivera, who does a lot of professional development in math, and who you may have had the good fortune of being in one of her workshops. She wrote an article titled, I Wish I Knew It Wasn't Magic, because growing up she thought, she looked at people who could do math and she sort of thought, oh, they're just good at math. They just have access to some magical thing that I don't have access to. But, actually it's not magic. It's a series of steps. It's understanding the concepts, and being able to follow a process. And so this little jar, you can see the jar of kind of amounts of coins. And a lot of people, if you just learn sort of rote math, you might think, oh, I have to line these up by columns, and then I have to add them up in a certain way. But she identifies here a totally different way of adding them up. And so can you identify what she did? And you can use the chat box if you want to share or just notice it for yourself. And then I was wondering if anybody would want to just quickly add up the amounts in the other jar, the one that doesn't have the circles and arrows. It's, once you kind of see what's going on here, it's something you can add up fairly quickly. Anita says she matched totals, so they would each equal 100, right? Yeah. And then it's easier, as Lisi says, because you're adding whole numbers. Yeah, great. Not adding fractions. Excellent. So that's a strategy right there. Has anybody managed to add up the amounts in the other jar yet? I'm waiting. It's very doable. I did it myself. $6, says Andy. Ding, ding, ding. That's the correct answer. Thank you. Yeah, if you, and I don't know, tell me if you're a math teacher, does that feel like it's cheating? If you kind of quickly add up the two 50s and the 80 and the 20, the 10 and the 90, right? Is that cheating or is that just a different strategy? I mean, I think, the point we're trying to make here is it's definitely not cheating. It's a strategy, and the strategy can be useful. And even if they weren't so perfectly rounded, you could still use it as a shortcut, and then you might have to do some scribbling on a piece of paper to figure out the rest of it. But, why not make these kinds of shortcuts and strategies available to students? And you'll be surprised how many they already have. I see a repost from Ed. Yeah, and Ed, if you send your chat to all participants, then it will just go to everybody if you have access to that all participants option in your chat. Otherwise, this is going to Mike privately. Yes, he says, not cheating, good strategy. Couldn't agree with you more. So thank you all. Those are some of the reasons why doing an interdisciplinary approach is helpful. It's helpful for your students, and I'm arguing it's helpful for teachers because the way we set up our classes often is the math teacher is totally different from the literacy teacher. But if in your program you're sort of talking to each other and helping each other recognize where the skills overlap, then you can be, even if you're not both a math and an ELA teacher, you still can be speaking to the math skills as you're teaching your English class, and that's going to really support your students and help them succeed. And it's going to make your job easier and your colleagues' job easier. So that's the case I'm making for the interdisciplinary approach and why it matters. So now let's look at the practices. So as I said before, ELA doesn't have practices. We just have standards listed at different levels. But math does have practices, and it has also domains, and then within the domains, different levels. So maybe that's part of why things get siloed, is because you can't really line these things up very easily, but I'm lining them up anyway. I'm just kind of forcing the situation because like I said, I think it really makes a difference for our teaching and for our students. So the first one I picked, and I just picked 4 here, and there's probably more, but these are the 4 that I picked for this webinar. The first one is this math practice, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. And the equivalent in the ELA standards, I think, is be able to grapple with increasingly complex texts. So most of you, if you're teaching in ELA, you know that this is a big deal for the new college and career readiness standards, that students have to be able to engage with more and more complex texts. So it's a similar thing. If you're confronted with a problem in math, or you're confronted with a document or a text in English class that looks hard, what are you going to do? What are your strategies going to be for sticking with it and for trying to solve it and get meaning out of it? So very similar kind of practice, a similar kind of skill, and we want our students to be, experiencing success in both of these kinds of ways. And if they do it in one discipline, it's going to translate into the other discipline. I'm going to check the chat box every once in a while. If anybody wants to make a comment, please just chime in, and I'll try to track you. If I'm missing anything, Mike, you can always interrupt me and let me know. Okay, a second math practice, construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. This is very aligned with the ELA practice of being able to point to evidence in the text and to support your arguments. But I mean, in order to support your arguments. So if you're saying that, oh, this writer's main idea is X, well, I'm going to say to you as your teacher, show me why you think that. Where in the text are there details that support the idea or your analysis that this is the main idea? Similarly with writing, we want our students to not just be making grand sweeping statements without any evidence or any details to back up their arguments. So we're always pushing our students to point to the evidence in the text that they're reading and to be able to use evidence in the text when they're writing. And this is very similar to, in math, being able to make an argument for why something is true and to be able to look at the reasoning of others and say, what's good or maybe not so good about their reasoning. So do you see the overlap there in those two? Oh, Cynthia's saying this practice is my favorite. Oh, I'd love to hear more about why. I think I can imagine that for a math person, this is where it gets really deep, right? It's not just the answer. It's not just, oh, you got the right answer, check. It's also, I know why I got the right answer, and I understand what's going on here. And I think probably for math teachers, that's what you really want to be teaching, not just that somebody knows how to kind of, in a rote way, follow steps and get the right answer. But yeah. Lisi is writing, connection is key for teachers and students. Yes, thank you. Okay, let's look at the third one. This math practice is called attend to precision. And do we do that in literacy? Absolutely. You know, sometimes in literacy, we're sort of at the level of trying to talk about meaning and understanding, and that can kind of get away from, you know, the nitty-gritty of punctuation and capitalization and spelling and things like paragraph indents and margins and stuff. But it's connected, though, right? Because we do get meaning from being precise, and it can be hard to actually understand the meaning if spelling is really off, or if paragraphs aren't clear, or if certain words aren't capitalized. You know, you can lose understanding and lose meaning if you lack in some of these what is it called, mechanics in literacy. And certainly in math, you know, in addition to wanting to be able to explain the argument that they might have made for, or the reasoning for how they got their answer, we do want them to get the right answer too, right? And right and wrong matter in math for many reasons and in many situations. So, you know, precision is important across these disciplines. And so really bringing that up with our students, encouraging them to be precise, you know, even just using the word precision and precise, you know, it's teaching students this discipline. So really important cross-disciplinary skill there. And then our fourth one is use appropriate tools strategically. And, you know, what does it mean? I mean, this is literally tools, you know, like paper and pencil, calculator, ruler, protractor, spreadsheet. You know, those are some of the tools of math. You know, a paper and pencil, scratch paper, that's how you can solve a problem. You could use a calculator. These are pretty self-evident tools of math. What about in literacy practice? Also very similar, right? What are some of our tools? Dictionaries, grammar check, spell check, internet search. I use internet search all the time when I'm confused about a grammar thing. I just pop it in the Google search and I try to find out the answer. Another tool in ELA is maybe feedback from others. You know, getting people to read the things that you write and getting them to ask you questions about it so that you can get clearer and clearer and use the mind of somebody else, you know, to help you get clearer. So that's another tool that we might use. And there's many other tools. There's all sorts of reading strategies that we teach that really come in handy, especially if you're approaching a hard document. So yes, big interdisciplinary moment here with this using tools strategically. Let me check and see. Cynthia says, and I have to listen to others' thinking and think about whether or not their thinking makes sense. Oh, what a great, thank you for that. I have to listen to others' thinking. Like, if only we could do that more in this world, right? Just being able to listen, actually listen carefully and understand what they're trying to say, and then think about it, cogitate on it, you know, and respond to it in a constructive way. That is an incredibly powerful skill that we use in academics and in the workplace. Linda says, precision is also using the correct vocabulary word in a certain situation or to describe a certain event or emotion. Yes, exactly. Choosing the right word. And, you know, that's a big part of our ELA class. And thinking, you know, using feedback from others to think about why a word might be the best word or why it might not be the best word. And really good chance for our ESOL learners to practice that, because there's a lot of confusing things in English. Okay, Lisi says, writing students learn from writing math problems for others to solve. Yes, writing the problem is actually a great way to learn how to solve them, and also kind of demystifies it, right? Like if you're writing the problem yourself, it kind of demystifies it. So thank you for all that. Appreciate hearing from people. So now that we've gone through those four interdisciplinary places, I wonder if people would like to think back on that first activity that we did and ask yourselves, which of those cross-discipline practices did we use to solve this problem here, which was to write two statements comparing the number of siblings. I'll put the 4 practices up on one slide so you can remind yourself. Which of these did you use when you did that activity? Attend to precision, says Anita. Yeah, exactly. That's definitely. Anything else? Lisi says number 2. Smart, Lisi. I like your strategy of just putting the number rather than spending all the time typing. Good modeling there. Yes, number 2, Linda says use practice 2 to construct an argument. Yes, and that would come in handy if you did this activity in the classroom and you did the approach that I shared with you where you put up the newsprint. People then are going to look at what other people's statements and possibly critique their reasoning. So, they're definitely going to use this math practice, which is very similar to point 2 under the ELA practice, which is right, using evidence and finding out, where is the evidence that this is true. You're not really using appropriate tools too much, right? Because people are mostly just working in their heads. What about number 1, make sense of a problem and persevere in solving it? That could come up, I would think, in that activity. Because at first people might just look at it and just be a little bit confused, like, what is she saying I'm supposed to do here? And I've had some people get a little confused. Well, wait, if they have this many siblings, is that the total number in the family? Or are they counting themselves? They have to kind of think about the English and how it's being used. And, no, they're not counting themselves. That the person has this many siblings, that means that the total number of siblings is, the number in the illustration plus 1. So there could just be little hang-ups like that, or little hiccups where people have to kind of think it through. Okay, so good. I think we just get to see that, we're trying things out. Here's another place where I thought there were many interdisciplinary math and English moments. This is another activity in the change agent where students have to compare different prices for different kinds of medicine. And actually, it's the same actual kind of medicine. It's ibuprofen, but one is a generic brand, and the other is Advil in liquid gels, and the other is Advil just in tablets. So I hope this is clear enough. I don't know if you can see it. I just did a snip from the page of the magazine, so it might be a little bit fuzzy. But yeah, this is a math activity that involves actually having to read the label pretty carefully and being able to have some access to being able to decipher, for example, what does mg mean? Do each of the pills have the same number of milligrams? Being able to think about, which is the least expensive. Well, it's pretty obvious if you ask your students which is the least expensive box. Okay, but then you might push them to start thinking about unit cost, which is the cheapest per pill. And if you look at the questions that we developed, that I and the editorial board developed here, the first question is, what math do you have to do to figure out the product that is best for you? So what math do you have to do? So the first question is just actually not even asking you to solve it, but asking you to think about what tools you need. So the second question is, if you shop for the cheapest price per box, which one would you choose? Well, that's not a very hard question. If you shop for the cheapest unit cost, the price per pill, which would you choose? So that's an ELA teaching moment too, unit cost. You could really break that down and think about the words and what they mean, price per pill, and that's going to really help with solving word problems in certain situations. And then, I don't know if other people have this problem, but sometimes when I'm confronted, I know I need to do division, but I don't know what I'm supposed to divide into what. Like, I just get stuck there. My brain gets a little frozen. I can't remember if I'm supposed to divide the number of pills into the dollar amount or the dollar amount, So what I do for myself is I create an easy thing that I know I could solve. Like, the box costs $1, it has 2 pills in it. Now that I know each pill is worth 50 cents, so I know to get that, I would have divided 2 into $1. So that sets up a little model for me that totally works and I'm really confident about, and then I just copy that model. So, you can kind of like uncover some different strategies here with your students. Finally, there's a question here, what else do you have to take into account? For example, maybe liquid gels are easier to swallow, so it may be worth paying more for them. So that kind of gives away that the unit cost of the liquid gels is the highest. That's the highest unit cost. But if those are the only kind you swallow, then you better not get the other pills, because then you're just wasting your money completely, right? At least by paying $8, you got something you can use. Or what about this? Is it always economical to get more tablets for a cheaper unit cost? So why or why not? And explain your answer. So just getting people to think mathematically, think, using English language words, to talk about this stuff. And people might have lots of examples in their life where they have to think about unit cost. And the story and the change agent that goes with this has a lot in it about unit cost. So yeah, you could check that out. So we're not gonna look at each one of, go back over all the practices for that one, but we're gonna look at this example here, and when we get to the end of it, I'm going to ask you again to think about which of those 4 math and ELA practices would come in handy. So this is a story about a poultry farm that a student in Colorado started. And he writes a whole story about, how he did this, how he borrowed money from his uncle, and how many chickens he bought, and how much the feed costs, and how much he has to pay for rent. And then he hired a friend to help him build a fence, and how much he had to spend for fencing. And he kind of really goes through and tells the whole story about starting this poultry farm. And it was very rich with math problems and real life math problems. And so we created a lot of math activities related to this. I just put 3 of the questions up. There's more, and there's also a whole packet online, which I'll point you to in a minute. But here's an example of a question that is going to involve math and literacy skills. How did Mustafa arrive at the total of $14,000 to start the poultry farm? Which of the expenses were one-time expenses and which are repeating? So this is going to be an activity where a student has to go back through the article and try to figure out how, because Mustafa just makes a statement that he needed $14,000 to start his poultry farm. So now the student has to go back and kind of check his math in a way. How did he come up with that number? How did he get to that number? So that's very rich with that ELA, skill of being able to point to evidence, being able to find the place in the text where you can back up, why you think what you think. And also, the part of the activity is you can take that information and put it on a spreadsheet. So a spreadsheet is a great organizing tool. It's basically a graphic organizer in a way that also does has formulas in it and can solve math for you. So that is a very cross-disciplinary thing too, being able to organize information in an organizer. And also, Andy mentioned, digital literacy. This is another thing that we're really being pushed in the classroom to bring digital literacy to our students. So if you did have the capacity to get everybody on, say, Google Sheets or just opening an Excel on their laptops, if you have computers at your school, or then you're really enriching this part of the lesson by teaching them how to use a piece of software that could really make a difference for them in college and in future workplace. Another question here is, how much money does he earn from the farm in 5 months? So now we're getting people have to think. They have to use a multiplier effect to think about how much he makes over time. And it's a little bit complicated, because there's all sorts of things happening, like he's collecting eggs every month, and he's also selling chickens to the slaughterhouse every 5 months. And so, there's just a lot of kind of careful thinking and taking apart of the story that you have to do. What reasonable changes could he make to bring in more revenue in less time and show the changes in your spreadsheet? So again, just having people working on a spreadsheet, having them use a tool that's really helpful, having them make formulas, becoming comfortable with the word formula and seeing what a formula can do, how it can make your life easier and faster, especially if you get the formula correct. And then just thinking critically about, how he could make some adjustments. Would that work? Would it not work? You could critique each other's reasoning. People could work in small groups and, one group could present to the other group about how they would do it, and then the group they could each respond to each other's strategies and see which ones made the most sense and say why. Oh, Ed is chiming in that he has a small flock of 12 hens. Do you really? Oh, that's awesome. You said you enjoyed reading the article. I'm really glad. I wonder if you would ever do this with your students. And I bet, many of our students have a lot of experience with, kind of small farming and with raising livestock and would have opinions about how to make it work. So thank you for that, Ed. So I have here at the bottom of this slide, you can see a URL, and hopefully you can all see it. If you can't, maybe, or actually, why don't you do this anyway, Mike? If you're there, if you wouldn't mind dropping the URL in to the chat box, and that would make it clickable for people. There's a spreadsheet there for you to download and adapt. And so I'm just trying to make it as easy as I can for teachers, right? Like rather than having you have to start from scratch making a spreadsheet, I gave you one, and just download it and then just save it as a new name and just adapt it however you want. There's also a worksheet in Word, because in case getting into Excel is sort of too much, you could just print out a paper version of it and people could just do the math, on the paper spreadsheet. Or also, I think in Word you can put formulas in there, so you could just use it like a spreadsheet in Word. So that's all there, and students would get a chance to practice with that. Here's another activity, and this is also in that lesson packet, a chance to plot out the poultry farm. He talks a little bit about square footage and how much square footage his chicken coop takes up, and how much square footage of open space his chickens get. And he's trying to have an organic chicken farm where free-range chickens, they get to move around. But he doesn't say how big each. Oh no, he does say how big it is, but you don't know the shape of it. And so that's what this challenge is to try to draw the poultry farm on this grid. So a really fun chance for students, very open-ended. It can look all kinds of different ways. I gave you two solutions that I came up with myself that are possible answers, but there's many more possible answers and all kinds of different ways to do it. So that would be a fun activity for people to try. I see the link is up there in the chat box. So yeah, if anybody wants to just click on that and go to it, you can download this little packet. It's got the article. It's got a whole bunch more information and activities for you to use. So you could probably spend a few weeks in your classroom using that. So what's another ELA angle with this activity? And what I came up with was this idea of writing a letter to Mustafa. And I thought this would be good because in the letter to Mustafa, you can say whatever you want, but you need to reference what he talked about in his article. So you can give him advice, you can talk to him about his work choice, you could talk to him about your chicken farm, but you would need to reference things that he talks about. So you're kind of showing that you're bouncing off of his article. And that's going to be refining that skill of being able to read for detail and use detail and write in response to what the text actually says. And so I came up with two tools that you could share with your students. One is a template that you can see what it is, right? It just has all the ingredients of a letter, but it doesn't have any content. And then the other is a model where I wrote a letter to Mustafa myself, and I just wrote it in my own voice as the editor of the change agent. And I don't even know if it might be too small for you to read. The point isn't so much what I say in it. The point is just that it's a model for how to write a letter. And do people offer their students models sometimes in their when you're teaching, or does it feel a little bit like you're kind of giving away the whole, you're giving away the answer kind of? I mean, I as a teacher myself have often used models because I feel like, especially for the beginning literacy learners, it helps them see one way that it can be done. And I notice that my beginners will often copy my language. And I say, look, I try to teach people about wholesale copying is not okay, but sort of copying some of the phrases, grabbing a phrase or two and just basically working them into your own piece. That's actually just a good strategy, That's a strategy that I would support. Also, the model kind of is open to critique. Like somebody could read this and sort of maybe not like it, or think it's too this or too that, or maybe wonder why I said this or something. So there's a little opportunity to critique. And whenever you're critiquing someone's writing, you're learning a lot about how to be a good writer. So one more ingredient, I'm going to go back to the chat box in a minute, but one more ingredient of this activity is a rubric that I really believe in using rubrics with my students to be very transparent with them about what I'm looking for when I grade, quote unquote grade. I don't really give grades, but what is my feedback going to be based on? So what am I really looking for? And if I'm very transparent about all the ingredients that I want, then they can, respond to the things that I'm clearly saying I want. And so this rubric gives points for, including all the letter parts, for presentation, for being able to use the conventions properly, and the parts that you can't see on the rubric, you can't see it, but it's in the packet if you go print out the packet. I think the other ones in here include, for example, voice, because, somebody might or might not have great spelling, but they might have a really powerful voice, and I want to be able to honor that. I want to give lots of points for voice because somebody really was very original or very witty or fun to read or something just very engaging, and I want to give them points for that. And I don't want to just mark them down because maybe their spelling was bad or something. So these rubrics can be really great teaching tools. And then the other great thing about them is that you give your students a chance to experience improvement and gradually mastery. Because if you assign letter writing over and over again, and you use the rubric over and over again, they're gradually going to really get it. Their margins are going to be there every time. They're going to indent their paragraphs. They're going to include all the letter parts. They're going to understand that bit about voice. They're just going to, with practicing it over and over, they're going to see their scores just going to go up and up and up. So it's a fun way for students to be able to experience mastery. Yes, I see that Lisi says she loves rubrics. Thank you for using student language since rubrics are for students. Yes, yes. And, the transparency piece I think is important because sometimes students feel sort of like, it's a mystery. What is she looking for? What is my teacher really looking for? I don't really know. And some people seem to know what she wants, and other, and some of our students don't have a lot of experience in school. So, it's not clear what a teacher wants. And so let's just break it down for them and be really clear about it. Andy says, oh yeah, going back up a little bit, the model isn't just cheerleading. Oh right, the model that I wrote. In the letter that I wrote to Mustafa, it wasn't just cheerleading. I mean, if somebody wanted to write a letter like that, that would be fine. But my letter is a little bit more nuanced. It's a little bit more questioning of his choice. And then, Sherry's also noticing that I modeled honesty. I don't know if I would ever send that letter to Mustafa personally. And, whenever I have my students do letter writing, I always talk about, are we really sending these letters or not? And that's a good thing to have in front of you, whether you're going to actually send them. Andy's saying that, yes, students will know how to create a rubric. That's really a great part of a lesson someday, is to have them create the rubric themselves. And Ed is saying that the old GED had a nice rubric to use with evaluating the GED essay. Yes, good. And the REAP, too. I don't know if people know about the REAP, but that's one thing I liked about the REAP a lot, was that it had the rubric that you could grade by. Okay, so this has been a big mouthful. You guys hear me losing my voice. I'm talking at you a lot. But I want you to say a little bit now. I kind of unloaded. I'll actually scroll back through some of those slides. So as I do, I want you to think about these 4 practices. So which of them would come up if you were to teach this poultry article? And now I'm going to scroll back through some of these slides. If you were to teach this poultry article, what would some of these skills be that would be cross-disciplinary? You've got your article, you've got your discussion questions, problems to solve and think about. Got a spreadsheet activity, got a chance to plot out the poultry farm, got a letter writing activity, These are some of the things that you could do with this poultry farming activity. And so what are these practices? Lisi says all 4. Yeah, definitely. I don't know, do other people want to chime in, or should we just go with all 4? Because that's pretty accurate. And I hope that maybe you've had a chance to see not just so you've seen modeled some activities, and also coaxing out the overlap between the practices, so that perhaps that can inspire you, whether you're a teacher, whether you do PD, whether you're a program director, to get together with other teachers and think about how you can be stressing these practices in the classroom, knowing that it's going to build student skills across disciplines. Andy's saying, Anita's saying that all 4 would be relevant if you did all the activities. Yes, I agree. And Andy's saying variety of text is also prominent here, not just complexity. Yes, thank you. Variety of text. Yeah, because you're having to use text in all sorts of different ways. And that's a key college and career readiness skill. And then Ed says all 4, and it is good practice with careful reading. Yeah, it's good practice. I can't tell you how long I worked on this, and Cynthia Bell actually helped me with this. I've had to go back over it and correct things a few times. So it's very, there's a lot of precision involved and careful reading. So, and that was my experience of it myself. So, okay, it's 2:53. We just have a few more minutes. So I'm going to put this slide up, but while I talk about this, I want to just ask people if you feel like you kind of have taken away this idea that the standards have this interdisciplinary nature, and that there's a case to be made for why it matters, and for why we should teach with this in our minds, and why we should be transparent to students about this. And our idea here is, if we de-silo these skills, we're supporting our students and ourselves as teachers, making it just a little bit easier to grasp them, to work them across the different fields, and be more efficient in a way, if you will. And if anybody wants to add anything else that you got, maybe you got another insight as to why this matters, or to why you may or may not take it in to your classroom. And if you have a challenge that's coming to mind, I'd love it if you could put it in the chat box right now. What would be challenging for you about trying to do this? Let's see. Ed says that so often math applications are all about careful reading. What do you know? What do you want to know or need to know? Yeah, like if you're solving a word problem, that's often what we ask students to do. The first thing you have to think about is, what do you know, and what do you not know, or what do you need to find out? So you just, what is the variable? What's the unknown here that you're trying to solve? Lisi says, thanks for all the practical and specific examples. The only challenge is time the first time around. Yes, of course, teachers and time, that's our biggest issue. So in the long run, it's probably going to save time, but in the short run, there is a certain amount of work to, just wrap your mind around this, and to talk to fellow teachers about it, in case you wanted to check in. Say if you're an ELA teacher, you could check in with a math teacher about trying to work these practices into your classroom to support each other. Anita says, in Illinois, we've been encouraging the formation of professional learning communities after instructors complete our mandatory standards proficient training. This idea might help instructors from math and ELA work together in these groups, not in silos. Great. I hope so, Anita. That would be fabulous. And just so you know, the recording of this webinar will be available on the NELRC website, and I'm going to share that slide with you in a second. And also, you're going to get a PDF of the slides. So, feel free to share this information with your programs. Take it into your next staff meeting if you like, and see if it resonates, and see where you might want to go with it. Before I get to that last slide, though, I want to just point out that the Change Agent is free online if you're in New England. So all the New England states have bought bulk subscriptions, so you can just contact me and I'll tell you how to get free access to our online resources. And that includes everything: PDFs of all of our back issues, audio versions of all of our articles, and a lot more. And if you're not in New England, it's really cheap. It's just $20 per teacher per year. So get in touch if you'd like to subscribe, or just go to our website and click on the subscribe tab. This is our last slide, and it has my email address and Andy's email address, and also some of the information that I was just telling you, where the recording will be available. If you want to get more information about some of the PD offered by the New England Literacy Resource Center, you can go to that URL. And after this webinar, you will get an email with a PDF of the slides, as well as a very, very brief SurveyMonkey, which we would like to ask you to fill out as an evaluation of this webinar. We need these for our funders. They ask they ask for information about how our webinars were received. So please, please, please complete it. It's very short, and if you just do it right away, get it over with, and it would really be useful to us. So I want to appreciate everybody for being on here on the webinar today. I'm just going to look and see if there's any more chats that I could share. Sherry says we use Math Daily. Great. And Linda saying it was helpful to see the crosswalk. Oh, I did a whole thing on interdisciplinary topics, and I never used the word crosswalk, but that was, thank you for bringing that up. It's a good word. And then I see some thank yous here. Thank you all. I really appreciate your attendance and your participation here. It's been great spending this hour with you. And this brings us to a close of our webinar on math and ELA practices. Please be in touch if you have any questions. Thank you all so much, and have a great afternoon.